The grand entrance. The morning started like any other Tuesday for Commander Elena Vasquez. She was reviewing patrol reports in the Earth Defense Command Center when every alarm in the facility began screaming at once. Coffee splashed across her desk as she jumped to her feet, watching as dozens of red warnings flooded the main display screen. "What's happening?" she shouted over the chaos. Lieutenant Sarah Kim's fingers flew across her keyboard, her face pale with disbelief. "Ma'am, we have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Massive signatures unlike anything we've ever seen." Dr. Marcus Chen rushed from his communication station, nearly tripping over cables in his haste. "Commander, you need to see this. The energy readings are off every scale we have. These ships are enormous." Elena strode to the main viewing screen, her military training keeping her calm despite the unprecedented situation. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. 17 massive vessels hung in space above Earth, each one the size of a small city. They were painted in deep purple and gold, covered in elaborate decorations that caught the sunlight like jewelry. "Any response to our hail attempts?" Elena asked. "Nothing yet, ma'am," Dr. Chen replied, adjusting his thick glasses nervously. "But I'm picking up massive energy buildups across their fleet. They're preparing for something big." Aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion, Overlord Vextar stood 12 feet tall on his command throne. His skin was deep blue with silver markings that pulsed with inner light. 4 arms extended from his broad shoulders, each ending in clawed, hands that gripped the armrests of his jeweled seat. Behind him, banners displaying the Zerath Empire symbols hung from crystal pillars that reached toward the vaulted ceiling. "Sub-Commander Kethri," Vextar's voice boomed through the cavernous bridge. "Are the recording systems prepared for our grand announcement?" Kethri, smaller than her commander but no less imposing with her 6 eyes and serpentine tail, bowed deeply. "Yes, Supreme Overlord. All systems are ready to broadcast our message across this primitive world." "Excellent." Vextar rose from his throne, his ceremonial robes flowing around him like liquid starlight. "Today marks the 2147th world to bow before the Zerath Dominion. Prepare the Intimidation Protocol 7. The bridge crew moved with practiced precision, adjusting lighting to create dramatic shadows and activating the musical systems that would provide an appropriately menacing soundtrack. Holographic displays showed the positioning of their fleet in perfect formation around Earth. Back on Earth, Dr. Chen suddenly straightened at his station. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission. It's being broadcast on every frequency simultaneously, including our emergency channels." "Put it on the main screen," Elena ordered. The display flickered and filled with the image of Overlord Vextar's throne room. Dramatic music thundered from the speakers, the kind of ominous orchestral piece that belonged in an epic movie. Vextar himself appeared to be lit by spotlights, creating an impressive silhouette against the ornate background of his ship. "Inhabitants of the 3rd planet," Vextar began, his voice echoing with artificial reverb. "I am Overlord Vextar, Supreme Commander of the Zerath Dominion, Conqueror of Worlds, Master of the 17 Sectors." Behind him, his crew stood at attention in elaborate uniforms covered with medals and decorations. The camera angle shifted to show Vextar from below, making him appear even more imposing against the vaulted ceiling of his bridge. For 4,000 years, the Zerath Dominion has brought order to the chaos of the galaxy. 2,146 worlds have recognized our supreme authority and joined our glorious empire. Today, your world will become the 2,147th. The music swelled dramatically as images of burning cities and fleeing crowds filled the screen. Explosions bloomed in slow motion while the camera panned across scenes of devastation. Your leaders will present themselves immediately for processing of submission. Your military forces will stand down and await assignment to Imperial service. Your people will demonstrate proper respect for their new masters. Vextar raised all 4 arms, in a gesture clearly designed for maximum dramatic impact. Resistance is not merely futile. It is an insult to the natural order of the universe. Those who oppose the Dominion face only death and dishonor. The transmission switched to show the alien fleet in formation, weapons charging with elaborate light displays, and energy effects that took nearly a minute to complete. You have 12 of your rotational periods to comply. The Zerath Dominion does not negotiate with inferior species. As the message ended with more thunderous music and a final dramatic pose from Vextar, the command center fell completely silent. Elena stared at the screen, her mind trying to process what she had just witnessed. Then Lieutenant Kim snorted. It was a tiny sound, barely audible, but in the quiet of the command center, it might as well have been a gunshot. Did that guy just threaten to blow up Earth while standing in front of mood lighting? She asked. Dr. Chen pushed his glasses up his nose, fighting to keep his expression serious. The dramatic pauses were a bit much, and that music sounded like it came from an old space opera. People, Elena said, trying to maintain her composure. This is a serious situation. We're dealing with potential invasion by a superior alien force. Oh, absolutely serious, ma'am, Lieutenant Kim agreed, but her voice was shaking slightly. Very serious. The fate of humanity hangs in the balance. But did you see the way he kept waving all four arms around? And the medals, added Sergeant Rodriguez from the tactical station. Did anyone count how many medals that guy was wearing? It looked like he raided a costume shop. Dr. Chen covered his mouth with his hand, his shoulders starting to shake. The reverb on his voice was so over the top, it sounded like he was broadcasting from inside a cathedral. That did it. Lieutenant Kim burst out laughing, not a polite chuckle but full-blown laughter that echoed through the command center. The sound was infectious, and within seconds the entire crew was struggling to contain their amusement. Elena felt her own composure cracking. The alien's presentation had been so incredibly theatrical, so over the top in its execution, that it felt like a parody of every alien invasion movie ever made. Ma'am, Dr. Chen managed to say between chuckles. Should we prepare a response? Get me a line to the president, Elena said finally. And Chen, make sure you include the full recording of their transmission. I have a feeling the whole world is going to want to see this. Within hours, the alien broadcast had spread across every communication network on Earth. Social media exploded with reactions as billions of people watched Overlord Vextar's dramatic announcement. The comment sections filled with observations about the theatrical lighting, the excessive decorations, and the alien commander's incredibly serious delivery of lines that sounded like they came from a bad science fiction movie. Comedy shows immediately began creating sketches featuring overly dramatic alien overlords. Street artists drew caricatures of Vextar with his forearms spread wide and his elaborate costume. Children played games where they pretended to be serious space conquerors making important announcements with dramatic poses. Meanwhile, aboard the Eternal Dominion, Sub-Commander Kethri approached Vextar's throne with obvious confusion written across her six-eyed face. Supreme Overlord, she said carefully. Our monitoring stations are reporting unusual activity across the planet's communication networks. Excellent, Vextar replied, settling back into his throne with satisfaction. The terror is spreading. As expected. Soon their leaders will contact us to arrange their surrender. Actually, my lord, Kethri hesitated. The activity appears to be laughter. Vextar's silver markings dimmed with confusion. Laughter? Explain. The inhabitants are sharing recordings of your announcement, but their reactions are amusement rather than fear. Our translation systems confirm they are making jokes about the imperial decree. For the first time in his very long career of conquest, Overlord Vexitar found himself completely speechless. In 4,000 years of expanding the Zerath Dominion, no species had ever responded to the intimidation protocol with laughter. Show me, he commanded. The main display lit up with feeds from Earth's internet. Humans of all ages were watching the alien message and bursting into laughter. Teenagers were imitating Vextar's dramatic gestures. Adults were sharing the video with friends, pointing and giggling at the screen. Late-night talk show hosts were already planning entire segments around the dramatic alien overlord. This is impossible, Vextar muttered, his four hands gripping his throne so tightly that the crystal armrests began to crack. Fear is universal, All intelligent species understand the threat of superior force. Perhaps, Kethri suggested. Carefully. These humans are simply too primitive to understand the seriousness of our message. No, came a new voice from the back of the bridge. Intelligence Officer Zixmoth stepped forward, her scaled hide reflecting the bridge lights nervously. Our scans show they have achieved faster-than-light communication, nuclear fusion, and complex orbital manufacturing. They are not primitive. They are choosing to laugh. The bridge fell silent as the implication sank in. For 4,000 years, the Zirath Dominion had built their empire on a foundation of intimidation and fear. Every species they encountered had responded with terror, submission, or desperate resistance. Never laughter. Sir, Kethri said quietly, we're receiving reports from other sectors of the Empire. Several conquered worlds are asking questions about the humans' reaction. Vextar's markings pulsed with alarm. What kind of questions? They want to know why beings who can be made into internet memes were ever considered terrifying. For the first time in centuries, Overlord Vexitar began to suspect that the Zirath Dominion might have a very serious problem on their hands. And it all started because a species called humans had looked at his most intimidating presentation and decided it was funny. The laughter from one small blue planet was about to bring down an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 4,000 years. The Empire Crumble's ambassador Sarah Mitchell sat in the diplomatic shuttle preparing for the most important meeting in human history. Across from her, Captain Torres reviewed security protocols while Dr. Chen made final adjustments to their translation equipment. Through the shuttle's viewport, the massive alien flagship loomed like a floating palace of crystal and gold. Remember, Sarah said, straightening her diplomatic uniform, we want to be respectful but not submissive. These aliens clearly expect us to be terrified, but that doesn't mean we should be rude. Captain Torres checked his sidearm one more time. Ma'am, our intelligence suggests their entire society is built around hierarchy and intimidation. They probably haven't dealt with equals in centuries. Which is exactly why this might work, Dr. Chen added, looking up from his equipment. Humans have always been good at deflating authority figures who take themselves too seriously. As their shuttle docked with the alien vessel, Sarah felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. Earth's reaction to the Zirath ultimatum had spread far beyond anyone's expectations. Within 48 hours, the alien broadcast had become the most shared video in human history, spawning thousands of parodies, remixes, and memes. But more importantly, their laughter had begun to ripple across the galaxy in ways nobody could have predicted. The shuttle bay of the Eternal Dominion was enormous, designed to intimidate visitors with its sheer scale. Towering pillars supported a vaulted ceiling covered in intricate carvings that told the story of Zirath conquests. Sarah and her team were escorted through corridors lined with trophies from defeated worlds, weapons, artwork, and artifacts that spoke of civilizations forced to submit. They entered a vast throne room where Overlord Vextar waited on his crystal seat. The alien commander had clearly prepared for this meeting with even more theatrical elements than his broadcast. Dramatic lighting cast long shadows across the chamber, and a full orchestra of alien musicians provided ominous background music. Humans, Vextar began, his voice echoing through the chamber. You dare approach the Eternal Dominion with such casual disregard for our power? Ambassador Mitchell stepped forward with a diplomatic smile. Overlord Vextar, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss our respective positions. The alien's four eyes widened in confusion. Discuss? There's nothing to discuss. You will submit to the Empire or face destruction. Well, that's certainly one option, Sarah replied cheerfully. But we were hoping we might find a way to coexist peacefully. Earth has always believed in the value of cooperation between different peoples. Vextar's blue skin darkened with bewilderment. Coexist? You would coexist with beings who could destroy your world with a thought? Why would you want to destroy our world? Captain Torres asked. It seems like such a waste. Wouldn't it be better to work together? Dr. Chen stepped forward, pulling out his tablet. Overlord, your technology is clearly advanced. We could learn much from each other through peaceful exchange. For instance, Your faster-than-light travel systems combined with human creativity could open up incredible possibilities for exploration and discovery. Vextar looked from one human to another, his elaborate costume suddenly feeling heavy and ridiculous. In every other first contact, representatives from conquered worlds had either cowered in terror or begged desperately for mercy. These humans were treating him like a potential business partner. "You do not understand," Vextar said slowly. "The Zerath Empire rules through strength. The strong command, the weak obey. This is the natural order." "That's one way to look at it," Sarah agreed. "But humans have found that cooperation tends to produce better results than domination. We've tried the other way and it didn't work out very well for anyone." What Vextar didn't know was that similar conversations were happening all across his empire. On 127 different worlds, conquered species were watching recordings of humanity's first contact and asking questions their overlords couldn't answer. On the desert world of Keth Prime, Elder Zephyron gathered his people in secret caves beneath the planet's surface. For 3 centuries, his species had lived under Zerath rule, their warrior culture suppressed and their independence crushed. But now, watching humans laugh at the same dramatic speeches that had terrorized his ancestors, something began to stir in the old fighter's heart. "My friends," Zephyron whispered to the assembled crowd, "look at these humans. They are not stronger than us. They do not have better weapons than us. But they have something we lost long ago. They refuse to be afraid." On the ice world of Glacier's Edge, the crystalline frost singers shared the human videos through harmonic frequencies that the Zerath couldn't detect. Their leader, Melody of Storms, sang softly to her people. "Listen to their laughter, children of ice. Remember when we too found joy in defying those who claim to be our betters?" In the asteroid mining stations of the Broken Ring, mechanical beings called the Builders paused in their endless labor to process what they were seeing. For so long they had accepted that resistance was futile, but these humans had shown that sometimes resistance could be funny. Back aboard the Eternal Dominion, Overlord Vextar was discovering that intimidation was a difficult strategy to maintain when your targets kept asking if you needed help adjusting the mood lighting. Sub-Commander Kethri approached his throne with increasingly urgent reports. "Supreme Overlord," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We're receiving communication blackouts from 17 sectors. Multiple worlds are reporting technical difficulties with their tribute shipments." "Technical difficulties?" Vexitar's markings pulsed with dangerous energy. "Yes, my lord. The Frost Singers claim their mining equipment has developed a sense of humor and refuses to work. The Builders say their construction robots have started making jokes instead of buildings. And the Keth Warriors." She paused nervously. "What about the Keth Warriors?" "They've declared that anyone who needs that much mood lighting and background music to appear threatening probably isn't actually threatening." Meanwhile, in the diplomatic meeting, Ambassador Mitchell was discovering that 4,000 years of unchallenged authority had left the Zerath leadership completely unprepared for negotiation. Every time they made a dramatic threat, the humans responded with practical questions about logistics and implementation. "If you destroy Earth," Dr. Chen pointed out reasonably, "you'll lose access to our entire technological database, our cultural resources, and our potential contributions to galactic civilization. From an economic standpoint alone, that seems counterproductive." Captain Torres nodded in agreement. "Plus, managing a terrified population requires significant resources. Wouldn't a cooperative partnership be more efficient?" Vextar's carefully constructed persona began to crack under the weight of questions he had never needed to consider. For 4,000 years, conquered species had simply accepted their fate. No one had ever asked him to justify the logic of his empire. "The Dominion has always ruled through strength," he repeated, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "But why?" Sarah asked genuinely. "What's the goal? What are you trying to achieve besides control for its own sake?" It was a question that struck at the heart of everything Vextar had believed. The Zerath Empire had grown so focused on the process of conquest that they had forgotten to ask why conquest was necessary in the first place. Before he could answer, alarms began screaming throughout the ship. Intelligence Officer Zixmoth rushed onto the bridge, her scaled hide flushed with panic. Supreme Overlord, we have a situation across multiple sectors. 17 worlds have declared independence. 23 more are in open revolt. The Keth. Prime rebellion has spread to 4 neighboring systems. The Frost Singers have turned their harmonic weapons against our occupation forces. And the Builders... She paused, checking her reports again. What about the Builders? They've constructed giant statues of you with exaggerated poses and installed sound systems that play dramatic music whenever anyone walks by. The local populations are treating them as comedy installations. Sarah tried very hard not to smile. Overlord, it sounds like your empire might benefit from a different approach to interspecies relations. But Vextar was no longer listening. 4,000 years of absolute authority were crumbling around him, and it had all started because one species had looked at his most intimidating display and decided it was funny. Captain Torres leaned forward. Sir, if I may suggest, perhaps instead of ruling through fear, you could try leading through respect. Humans have found that people work much better when they want to help rather than when they're forced to comply. Dr. Chen pulled out his tablet. Again. We could help facilitate negotiations between your empire and the rebelling worlds. Mediation is something humans have gotten quite good at over the centuries. As if summoned by their words, Elder Zephyron's weathered face appeared on the chamber's communication screen. Behind him, Melody of Storms and several Builder representatives had joined what was clearly becoming an impromptu galactic conference call. Humans of Earth, Zephyron said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. We have watched your courage in the face of those who would intimidate you. Will you help us find a path to freedom that does not require endless war? Sarah looked at Vextar, whose forearms had dropped to his sides in defeat. Overlord, what do you say? Instead of emperor of a crumbling empire built on fear, would you consider becoming the founding member of a new galactic alliance built on cooperation? For a long moment, the throne room was silent, except for the dramatic background music that now seemed absurdly out of place. Then Vextar did something that would have been unthinkable just days before. He began to laugh. It wasn't the bitter laughter of defeat, but the genuine amusement of someone finally seeing how ridiculous their situation had become. 4,000 years, he said, shaking his head. 4,000 years of elaborate costumes and dramatic speeches, and it took one species with a sense of humor to show me how foolish it all was. 3 months later, the first Galactic Cooperation Summit was held on Earth. Representatives from 127 worlds gathered in New York to establish new frameworks for interspecies relations based on mutual respect rather than intimidation. Overlord Vexitar, now calling himself simply Vextar of the Zerath, had traded his elaborate robes for practical diplomatic attire. He still stood 12 feet tall and had 4 arms, but somehow he no longer seemed particularly intimidating. The humans taught us something important, he told the assembled delegates. They showed us that true strength doesn't come from making others afraid. It comes from making them laugh, making them think, and making them want to work together toward something better. Ambassador Mitchell smiled as she watched former enemies shake hands, claws, tentacles, and various other appendages in friendship. You know, she said to Dr. Chen, when this all started, I never imagined that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization would be teaching aliens not to take themselves so seriously. Dr. Chen chuckled, adjusting his glasses as he watched Vexitar attempting to learn human humor from a group of stand-up comedians. Sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to help them realize they don't need to be your enemy in the first place. And across the galaxy, on worlds that had known only fear for millennia, the sound of laughter echoed through the stars as a new age began, an age where strength was measured not by the fear you could inspire, but by the hope you could create. The mighty Zerath Empire had fallen not to superior weapons or military strategy, but to something far more powerful. The simple human ability to find humor in the absurd, and to choose cooperation over conquest. Sometimes the pen truly is mightier than the sword, but as humans had proven, sometimes laughter is mightier than both.